Knopf Glibber, hi friends, Darth Momo here, and today I want to rank everything Disney has produced for on-screen Star Wars as of fall 2023. Most of these, if not all of them, I've talked about at length in other videos, so if you want to hear my full thoughts on them, go ahead and check out my review videos, as I'll only be briefly discussing each entry to keep the runtime down. Keep in mind, this is all my opinion. If you love something I don't, good for you. If you hate something I like, well, I'm sorry it wasn't for you. We'll go from worst to best, starting with The Rise of Skywalker. It's no secret I don't like this movie, and in my opinion, I'd say maybe 5% of the film was actually good. To enjoy this movie, you kind of have to turn your brain off and just sit back and become a clapping seal. Least liked entry of the franchise, period. Well, except for the holiday special. Next up is Young Jedi Adventures. It definitely felt like I was watching a preschool show in Star Wars, but it wasn't abysmal to sit through. It had some small cool additions to the lore and a really enjoyable episode or two mixed in there. Next is Forces of Destiny. About half this show is pretty lackluster, but half the show was actually pretty enjoyable, especially some of the Clone Wars entries, and there were several fun additions to the lore. Next is Visions. I know it's not canon, but there was also some really cool episodes sprinkled throughout, especially in Volume 1 like The Elder or Tatooine Rhapsody. But I'm not the biggest anime fan, and a lot of the episodes were straight up forgettable to me. Next on this list is Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'm really not a big fan of this show, and I've liked it a lot less as time went on. The performances from Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen were phenomenal, and were without a doubt my favorite part of the show. But the show has some of the weakest dialogue in the franchise, and the story is mid at best. Plus, there's a lot of issues I think that adds to the continuity of the first two trilogies. Next is Book of Boba Fett. I really love this story this show was trying to tell, but it failed in the execution. It failed hard. It's got pretty slow pacing, a lackluster execution, 2 of 7 episodes that aren't even devoted to the main character and plot, and an extremely rushed and unsatisfying finale. My next entry on the list is The Force Awakens. Even though I think the film, mainly its story, hasn't aged that well over the last several years, I think there was still a lot of enjoyable aspects of this movie. While I don't think it's that good, it's not that bad. Not as bad as the other entries I've already gone over. But over the last few years, I'd definitely say overall I call this a forgettable movie. Not much new to add. My next ranking is Resistance. I would say the first half of Season 1 was more or less meh with a couple decent entries, but from the 12th episode onward, the show became really strong when it starts leaning heavily to the First Order plot especially. Season 2 was more or less decent, but overall I would call it a much stronger sequel-era entry than both episodes 7 and 9. The only downfalls really being the kiddie tone, and the fact that about 20% of the show ended up being filled. Next would be Ahsoka. Look, I love the second half of this show, and it's a little hard to rank it this low as opposed to the next few entries, but the first half was somewhat weak. I wouldn't call any of it bad, but it was very meh, a lot slower than I think it needed to be. But as a Rebels fan, it was a lot of fun. Next on my list is The Mandalorian. Some people might be surprised at how low I'm ranking this with how popular the show is, but I'm ranking the whole of the show, being all 3 seasons together, and the 3rd season was pretty rough. The first season was fun, but I only enjoyed about half the episodes. The other half were meh. I personally think the show is pretty overrated, and the episodes that really stood out to me and got me on board were the last 3 episodes of Season 2. After that, I have Tales of the Jedi. If it was just the Dooku stuff, this would be higher. And if it was just the Ahsoka stuff, this would be lower. I think there was a lot of potential with this miniseries, and choosing Ahsoka was not only a mistake, but caused lots of issues. Next, I'm going to slot in Solo. It's a film that I think didn't need to exist, but it's definitely a fun one. And that sums up Solo. If you want to hear my thoughts on Solo, check out my review. Next is Bad Batch. Bad Batch definitely has a lot of low points that would cause it to rank lower, but it has a lot of highs too that are really good. And overall, it leads it to be an average show. If they had less filler episodes and gave it more of an overarching plot, the show would, without a doubt, be a lot higher. This one is tough though, because there are days where I might take Mando or Ahsoka over it. But for now, let's stick with this. Now we're in my top 5. And I know this is going to get controversial, but my 5th favorite Disney entry in the franchise is The Last Jedi. I plan to do another video discussing my thoughts on this movie. Look, I know this film has problems, but there's so much good too. There's so many things about this movie that I love. This is the true gem of the sequel trilogy, and in my opinion, the only one that leaves an impact and is worth rewatching. Next is Andor. I wasn't crazy about Andor at first like a lot of people. I thought the first 5 episodes were pretty meh, but everything after that is amazing. Andor really is some of the best Star Wars, but the fact that it's only number 4 goes to show how good the next 3 entries are. Number 3 is Clone Wars Season 7. If this was the Siege of Mandalore alone, it would be number 1. But unfortunately, for me, the Martez sister arc doesn't kind of weigh it down. And that and the fact it doesn't feel like a proper final season until the last few episodes. But everything else was great. My second favorite entry from Disney goes to Star Wars Rebels. I could sit here and talk about this show all day. I love this show so much. Yes, there are some things I don't like and some things I would change, but the show just gets so much right. There are so many highs, so many top-tier Star Wars moments, and I think Kanan is one of the best characters in Star Wars. He's certainly one of my favorites, and I think he's got the best send-off too. Again, I love this show, almost as much as I love my favorite Disney Star Wars entry, Rogue One. I love this movie. I think it's one of the best Star Wars movies. I have seen this countless times, and I love it every single time. I recently got to see it again in theaters before Andor came out with a friend, and it was a blast. There are so many good characters, so many great moments, so many good music numbers, and the last act is just perfection. Such a great story. And that's my ranking of Disney Star Wars. What's yours? Let me know down in the comments. And as always, may the Force be with you. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. If you liked the video, comment down below and hit that like button. Oh, and check out some of my other videos. I'm sure you'll find them in the light.